Denali National Park is synonymous with wilderness at its most extreme. 6 million acres of Alaskan landscape dominated by North America's highest peak. Home to grizzly bears, caribou, and weather so harsh that mountaineers die attempting the summit, despite modern equipment and training. It's a place where nature dominates absolutely, where humans are visitors barely tolerated by an environment that has no interest in accommodating them. But hidden within Denali's vast wilderness are 6 areas that rangers won't discuss on the record, zones marked on internal Park Service maps with designations like Research Restricted, Closed Area, Permit Required, or simply No Entry, restrictions that official explanations attribute to wildlife protection, cultural sensitivity, or geological hazards. But rangers who've worked in Denali for decades tell different stories, whispered accounts of areas closed, not because of what lives there or what the ground might do, but because of phenomena that don't fit into neat biological or geological categories, events that suggest Denali's wilderness hides more than just extreme weather and dangerous animals. Today, we're uncovering the truth about 6 forbidden areas inside Denali National Park, zones where the Park Service maintains restrictions that seem excessive for standard conservation needs, where disappearances follow patterns that suggest something beyond getting lost, and where the few who've entered without authorization have returned with accounts so disturbing that official policy is to deny the areas exist at all, rather than explain why they're really closed. The Kantishna Hills Thermal Anomaly. The Kantishna Hills lie in the northwest corner of Denali, a region of low-rolling mountains covered in taiga forest and tundra, accessible only by a single rough road that ends at the old mining settlement of Kantishna. It's remote even by Denali standards, seeing few visitors compared to the park's more accessible areas. But since the 1980s, a section of the Kantishna Hills designated as Zone 7 on internal Park Service maps has been closed to all public access, officially because of concerns about disturbing caribou calving grounds, though caribou use many areas in Denali that remain open, making the explanation seem insufficient. The real reason Zone 7 was closed relates to something discovered during a geological survey in 1982. A team from the University of Alaska was mapping permafrost distribution and thermal characteristics of the Kantishna region when their ground-penetrating instruments detected an enormous heat signature beneath a valley in Zone 7. Readings that suggested temperatures approaching 800 degrees Celsius at approximately 300 meters depth. At first, they assumed they had discovered geothermal activity, perhaps a hot spring system or volcanic feature. But Denali isn't volcanically active. The nearest volcanic systems are hundreds of miles away, and geological surveys had never indicated any magmatic activity beneath the Kantishna Hills. When the team returned with more sophisticated equipment, the readings became even more puzzling. The heat signature appeared to be moving, migrating slowly through the subsurface over the course of weeks, and it exhibited geometric characteristics, angular patterns that seemed deliberately shaped rather than the irregular forms typical of natural geothermal features. The team's lead researcher, Dr. Sarah Kellerman, filed a report describing the anomaly and recommending further investigation. That report was quickly classified by the National Park Service and the U.S. Geological Survey, citing national security concerns related to potential energy resources. Dr. Kellerman was not invited to continue the research, and when she attempted to publish her findings independently, she received legal warnings that her work involved classified information and could not be disclosed. She left academia shortly after and has declined all interviews about the Kantishna thermal anomaly. But the story didn't end with classification. Rangers assigned to patrol the Kantishna region began reporting strange phenomena in Zone 7. Equipment malfunctions were common. Radios would lose signal, GPS units would fail, and compasses would spin erratically when entering the area. More concerning were reports of unusual sounds, deep rumbling vibrations that seemed to emanate from underground, and occasional plumes of steam rising from the ground in locations where no hot springs had been documented. In 1995, two rangers investigating reports of unusual sounds in Zone 7 entered the restricted area without authorization. hoping to determine if the sounds were caused by trapped gases or underground water movement. They returned after 3 hours, visibly shaken, and filed incident reports that led to immediate policy changes forbidding any ranger from entering Zone 7 without explicit authorization from the regional director. Authorization that has never been granted, according to fragments of their reports obtained through FOIA requests. The rangers described finding a section of valley floor that was warm to the touch despite air temperatures below freezing, vegetation that appeared heat-stressed despite the cold climate. And most disturbing, a circular depression in the ground approximately 30 feet in diameter that appeared to be slowly subsiding, as if something beneath was creating a void. When they approached the depression, both rangers reported experiencing severe headaches, nausea, and an overwhelming feeling of dread that forced them to retreat. Their physiological symptoms persisted for several days after leaving the area. Since then, Zone 7 has been monitored remotely using satellite thermal imaging and seismic sensors placed at the perimeter. The data from these instruments remains classified, but occasional leaks suggest that the thermal anomaly continues to exist and may be expanding. In 2014, satellite imagery of the zone showed what appeared to be fresh ground subsidence, creating new depressions in a geometric pattern that some analysts noted resembled artificial excavation, though no mining or construction activity has occurred in the area for decades. To this day, Zone 7 remains completely closed, and Park Service policy is to deny that it's anything more than sensitive caribou habitat. But rangers know the truth, that somewhere beneath the Kantishna Hills, something is generating heat that shouldn't exist, something that affects instruments and human physiology in ways that suggest electromagnetic or infrasonic effects, and something that the government has decided is better left sealed behind fences and warnings than investigated and explained. The Polychrome Pass disappearances. Polychrome Pass is one of Denali's most scenic locations, where the park road winds through mountains displaying brilliant colors from mineral deposits that paint the rock in reds, yellows, and purples. It's a popular stop for tour buses and photographers, and it's where the road crosses through terrain that rangers describe as difficult due to unstable slopes and avalanche danger. But there's another reason rangers discourage extended stops at Polychrome Pass. A reason that has nothing to do with avalanches and everything to do with a pattern of disappearances that clusters in a specific section of the pass, all sharing disturbing commonality. Between 1994 and 2018, 8 people have vanished while hiking in the area immediately surrounding Polychrome Pass. Not scattered across the broader region, but within a 2-mile section of trails and slopes below the overlook. The disappearances follow a pattern. Experienced hikers, who were with groups or visible to others, suddenly unaccounted for. Searches that find no tracks or signs of passage, despite soft ground that should record footprints, and in 2 cases where bodies were eventually recovered. Locations that make no logical sense given where the victims were last seen. The first case involved Margaret Riley, a 34-year-old photographer from Colorado, who was hiking with her husband in September 1994. According to his account, Riley was photographing wildflowers approximately 50 yards downslope from where he was standing. He looked away to adjust his own camera, and when he looked back less than a minute later, she was gone. Her camera was found on the ground where she'd been standing, still powered on, but Riley herself had vanished. Search operations involving over 80 personnel and helicopters found no trace. The case remains unsolved. What makes the Polychrome Pass disappearances particularly disturbing is the behavior of search dogs. In 5 of the 8 cases, trained search and rescue dogs tracked the missing person scent to a specific location on the slopes below the pass, a section of loose scree and rock, and then refused to continue it. Handlers described the dogs as becoming agitated, whining, backing away, and in one case, a typically aggressive German Shepherd laid down and wouldn't move despite commands. Behavior the handler had never seen in 5 years of search work. When handlers examined the location where the dogs stopped, they found nothing unusual, just typical mountain scree, but every dog brought to that spot exhibited the same refusal to continue. In 2009, a body recovery finally provided some answers, but generated even more questions. Timothy Norton, who had disappeared while day hiking in 2007, was found by a climbing party attempting a technical route up a cliff face approximately 3 miles from where he was last seen. Norton's body was wedged in a crack in the cliff face at 9,800 feet elevation, a location that would require technical climbing equipment to reach, and that Norton, who was wearing hiking boots and carrying only a day pack, couldn't have accessed. The autopsy revealed that Norton died from hypothermia and dehydration, but couldn't explain how he reached the location where he was found. His boots showed minimal wear, suggesting he hadn't traveled miles over rough terrain, and his body showed no injuries consistent with a fall from above. Park Service officials conducted an internal review and concluded that Norton must have become disoriented and climbed into the cliff through some route that investigators couldn't reconstruct. But the explanation satisfied no one, least of all Norton's family, who noted that their son had never rock climbed and was terrified of heights to the point of refusing to approach cliff edges. After Norton's recovery, the Park Service implemented new policies regarding Polychrome Pass. While the area isn't officially closed, rangers now strongly discourage leaving the road. Tour buses are instructed not to allow extended stops, and signs warn visitors to remain on established paths and within sight of others. But the subtle restriction is less about safety and more about preventing further disappearances in an area that rangers have come to view as cursed or dangerous in ways they can't officially acknowledge. Informal warnings circulate among Denali staff. Don't hike alone below Polychrome Pass. Don't investigate unusual sounds or movements in the scree fields. And if you start feeling disoriented or experiencing the sensation that you're being watched, return to the road immediately. These aren't official policies, just wisdom passed between rangers who've learned that Polychrome Pass's beauty hides something that claims hikers with regularity that seems targeted and deliberate. Something that search dogs can detect but humans cannot see. The Muldrow Glacier Research Station abandonment. Muldrow Glacier is one of Denali's largest and most studied glaciers, flowing from the slopes of Denali itself down through a massive valley. In 1962, the National Park Service, in cooperation with the U.S. Geological Survey, established a research station on the lateral moraine alongside Muldrow Glacier to study ice dynamics, climate impacts, and geological processes. The station operated continuously for over 20 years, staffed year-round by rotating teams of researchers who conducted measurements and collected data. Then, in January 1984, the station was abruptly abandoned, and the site has been restricted ever since. The official explanation is that the station became unsafe due to glacier movement and structural damage, and that the research was transferred to other locations. But documents obtained through FOIA requests tell a different story. In December 1983, the research team at Muldrow Station, consisting of 4 scientists, filed emergency reports requesting immediate evacuation and closure of the facility. The reports described a series of events that had escalated over several weeks. Strange sounds emanating from the glacier itself, described as metallic groaning or mechanical noise that didn't match typical ice movement. Equipment failures, including the station's diesel generator repeatedly shutting down without explanation, despite no mechanical faults being found, and most disturbing, sightings of lights moving within the glacier at night, visible through the translucent blue ice as glowing forms that appeared to navigate through the ice structure with apparent purpose. The lead researcher, Dr. James Holloway, reported that instruments measuring glacial movement had recorded anomalous data suggesting that portions of the glacier were moving in directions and at speeds that violated known glacial dynamics. Seismometers detected what he described as rhythmic vibrations with regular intervals, patterns that seemed artificial rather than natural. Most disturbing was an incident on December 18, 1983, when Dr. Holloway and a colleague ventured onto the glacier to service monitoring equipment and encountered what they described in their report as a structure embedded in the ice. A metallic or stone object with geometric surfaces that appeared deliberately constructed. visible through a crevasse approximately 50 meters from the glacier's edges. When they attempted to photograph the object, both men reported that their cameras malfunctioned, and they experienced sudden vertigo and disorientation that forced them to retreat. The evacuation was approved immediately, and the station was closed within a week. Subsequent reports from the Park Service cited structural damage and budget constraints as the reasons for abandonment, making no mention of the phenomena Dr. Holloway and his team reported. When journalists attempted to interview Holloway in the 1990s, they learned he had died in 1987 in an automobile accident. His research notes from Muldrow Station were never archived in the USGS records system, and attempts to locate them have been unsuccessful. Since 1984, the Muldrow Glacier area near the abandoned research station has been designated off-limits. Official signage cites danger from crevasses and unstable ice, but rangers report that the restriction extends far beyond what glacier safety would require, encompassing a large area surrounding the station site with perimeter markers and periodic patrols to ensure no one enters it. Mountaineers attempting to climb Denali via routes that pass near the restricted zone have reported unusual phenomena: unexplained lights visible in the ice at night, equipment malfunctions including GPS units and radios failing near the glacier, and a persistent low-frequency sound that some describe as humming or vibration that seems to emanate from within the ice itself. In 2006, a climbing team ignored warnings and camped near the restricted zone. They reported that during the night, their tent was bathed in blue light that appeared to come from the glacier, lasting approximately 30 seconds before fading. When they investigated in the morning, they found no source for the light and no evidence of human activity. That evening, park rangers met them at base camp and strongly encouraged them to complete their climb via an alternate route, advice they decided to follow. To this day, Muldrow Station remains abandoned, its structures slowly being consumed by ice and snow, and the glacier continues to flow past the site where researchers once studied it until they found something that made continued study impossible. Whether that something was a natural phenomenon we don't understand, an artifact buried in ancient ice, or something else entirely. It was disturbing enough that the government chose to fence off the area and let the station fall to ruin rather than send anyone back to investigate what Dr. Holloway and his team saw in December 1983. The Toklat River Valley Animal Behavior Anomaly. The Toklat River Valley is prime wildlife habitat in Denali, regularly transited by caribou, wolves, grizzly bears, and other species. Wildlife biologists have studied the area for decades, documenting animal behavior and population dynamics. But a specific section of the valley, designated Area 12 on internal wildlife management maps, has been the site of animal behavior so unusual that the Park Service closed it to researcher access in 1997 after a series of incidents that suggested the area affects animal neurology in ways that no one can explain. The first documented anomalies occurred in the early 1990s when wildlife biologists tracking wolf packs noticed that wolves entering Area 12 would sometimes exhibit disorientation, circling behavior, and in some cases, complete abandonment of pack structure, with individuals wandering off and becoming isolated. Collared wolves whose movements were tracked by satellite showed erratic movement patterns when in Area 12, traveling in tight loops or moving in directions that made no sense given their normal territorial behavior. When researchers examined wolves that died after spending time in the area, necropsies revealed no signs of disease, toxins, or physical trauma, yet their behavior before death was consistent with severe neurological disruption. In 1995, a research team from the University of Alaska Fairbanks received permission to study the phenomenon directly. They established a camp at the edge of Area 12 and began systematic observations of wildlife entering the zone. Within days, they documented disturbing patterns. Caribou that entered the area would sometimes freeze in place, standing motionless for extended periods before suddenly bolting in panic. Bears displayed unusual behavior, including digging repeatedly at the same spots as if searching for something. And birds flying over the area would occasionally exhibit flight patterns described as erratic or confused, with some birds falling from the sky for no apparent reason. When the research team ventured deeper into Area 12, they began experiencing symptoms themselves. Multiple team members reported severe headaches, visual distortions described as shimmering or waves in their peripheral vision, and auditory hallucinations including hearing voices or sounds that other team members didn't hear. 2 researchers developed nosebleeds while in the area, and one experienced a complete loss of sense of direction, becoming disoriented within sight of camp, despite being an experienced navigator. The team's electronic equipment malfunctioned consistently. Cameras would display error messages, GPS units would show incorrect locations or lose satellite lock, and audio recorders captured what they described as interference or strange, low-frequency sounds that weren't audible to the researchers themselves. After 1 week, the team evacuated Area 12 and filed a report recommending immediate closure pending investigation into potential environmental hazards. Subsequent testing found no radiation, no toxic chemicals, and no pathogens that could explain the effects. Geological surveys revealed nothing unusual about the area's composition or structure, yet the neurological effects on both animals and humans were undeniable and consistent. In 1997, after a wildlife photographer entered Area 12 without authorization and was found 3 days later, severely disoriented and dehydrated, despite carrying adequate supplies and being within 2 miles of the park road, the Park Service implemented the current restriction. Area 12 is now closed to all access, with the official explanation being protection of sensitive wildlife habitat. But the real reason is documented in internal memos that acknowledge the area poses unknown risks to human and animal health through mechanisms that remain unexplained. Rangers who patrol near Area 12 report that animals still exhibit unusual behavior in the zone, and that the area seems to pulse, with periods of intense activity where multiple animals enter and become disoriented, followed by periods where wildlife avoids the area entirely. Some rangers describe a feeling when approaching the boundary of Area 12, a sensation of pressure or presence that makes them instinctively stop and turn back, an intuition that something about the area is fundamentally wrong in ways that can be felt but not quantified. To this day, the Toklat River Valley anomaly remains one of Denali's most carefully guarded secrets, an area where the laws of nature seem slightly askew, where animal behavior defies biological explanation, and where human visitors experience neurological effects that suggest environmental factors we cannot detect with instruments, but that have profound impacts on consciousness and perception. The Park Service continues to monitor Area 12 remotely, and the restricted status remains in effect with no indication it will ever be lifted, because no one wants to be responsible for allowing visitors into an area that clearly affects the brain in ways that science cannot explain and technology cannot measure. The Ruth Glacier Ice Cave Incident. Ruth Glacier, on the south side of Denali, is known for spectacular ice caves that form in the glacier's margins. Blue-tinted chambers carved by meltwater that attract adventurous explorers despite the dangers of glacier travel. In 2001, a group of experienced ice climbers received a research permit to explore and map the ice caves of Ruth Glacier, documenting their formation and structure for a university glaciology project. The expedition proceeded normally for the first week, with the team mapping several known caves and discovering new formations. Then, on July 14, 2001, they entered a cave system that appeared on no previous maps, a network of tunnels extending deep into the glacier with characteristics that disturbed the experienced glaciologists on the team Corias. The tunnels were too regular, too geometric, with walls that appeared smooth or finished rather than naturally carved by water. The team documented their progress with photographs and notes, describing chambers that opened into larger spaces deep within the ice, and reporting that their instruments detected unusual readings, including magnetic anomalies and temperature variations that didn't match expected glacial thermal profiles. Then, communication was lost. The team had been checking in via satellite phone every evening, but on the night of July 14th they failed to make contact. Rangers initiated a rescue operation the following morning, and a helicopter located the team's camp at the glacier's edge, but the climbers themselves were missing. Search teams found the entrance to the cave system the team had been exploring and cautiously entered, finding evidence that the climbers had penetrated deep into the glacier, approximately 400 meters inside. Searchers found the team's equipment abandoned. Cameras, mapping tools, climbing gear, all neatly arranged as if deliberately left behind. But the team members were gone. Further into the cave, the search became more disturbing. The ice walls showed marks that rescuers couldn't explain. Regular patterns that looked almost like writing or symbols carved into the ice, though no one on the missing team had mentioned creating such marks. And deeper still, search teams reported experiencing the same instrument malfunctions the missing team had described. Compasses spinning, radios filling with static, and a pervasive sense of disorientation that made navigation difficult despite mapped routes. After 2 days of searching, one team member, Dr. Lisa Brennan, was found alive but severely hypothermic, wandering on the glacier surface 2 miles from the cave entrance. She was evacuated immediately, and after treatment, gave a statement that led to the immediate closure of Ruth Glacier ice caves to all public access. According to Brennan's account, the team had discovered something deep within the ice, a chamber that shouldn't exist given the glacier's age and formation, containing objects or structures that she described as impossible and wrong, things that made her and her team turn back. But when they tried to retrace their route, the tunnels had changed. Passages that they'd marked and mapped no longer matched their notes, as if the ice itself had shifted in the hours they'd been inside. The team became separated in the confusion, and Brennan only escaped by following a light she saw in the ice, a blue glow that led her toward the surface, though she couldn't explain how she knew to follow it or where her team members went. Search efforts for the remaining 4 team members continued for weeks, but no other traces were found. The ice caves were permanently closed, with official statements citing the incident as evidence of the unpredictable dangers of glacier exploration. But internal Park Service reports reveal more troubling details. Searchers reported hearing voices coming from deep within the ice, sounds that seemed like the missing team members calling for help. But when followed, the sounds would move or fade, always leading deeper into areas where the cave structure became increasingly unstable and strange. Eventually, the decision was made to seal the entrance to the cave system, dynamiting the opening and placing warning markers prohibiting any future entry. To this day, the Ruth Glacier ice caves remain off-limits, the site of a mystery that took 4 lives and left one survivor who refuses to speak about what she saw in those deep ice chambers. Rangers who fly over Ruth Glacier occasionally report seeing lights moving within the ice at night, blue glows that shift and travel, as if something inside the glacier is still active, still aware, still waiting for the next visitors who might be curious enough or foolish enough to enter the caves that swallowed an entire research team and gave back only one, forever changed and forever silent about what lies beneath the ice. The Wonder Lake Night Lights. Wonder Lake is one of Denali's most photographed locations, offering stunning reflections of Denali on calm days and serving as a prime location for viewing the aurora borealis. But Wonder Lake has another reputation among rangers and longtime park staff, a reputation for strange lights that appear on its surface at night, lights that don't match the aurora, aren't reflections of stars or moon, and behave in ways that suggest intelligence or at least patterns more complex than natural atmospheric phenomena. Reports of the Wonder Lake lights date back to the 1940s, when the park was still relatively new. Early rangers described seeing glowing orbs rising from the lake at night, hovering above the water before descending again, or moving across the surface in formation. The lights were typically described as blue-white or pale green, roughly the size of basketballs, and silent, moving without creating disturbance on the water, despite sometimes appearing to skim the surface at high speeds. Over the decades, hundreds of people have witnessed the lights, including park officials, researchers, tourists, and photographers who came to capture the aurora and instead documented something stranger. In 1976, a photographer named Daniel Corbett set up a time-lapse camera to capture star trails over Wonder Lake. The resulting footage, which was submitted to the Park Service and later classified as internal documentation, showed the lights emerging from the lake at regular intervals, moving in geometric patterns, and at one point, responding to Corbett's flashlight by approaching his location before retreating back to the water. Corbett described the experience as deeply unsettling, noting that when the lights approached, he felt a pressure in his chest and heard a high-pitched tone that seemed to come from inside his head rather than the environment. The Park Service investigated the phenomenon multiple times, most extensively in 1989, when a team of scientists from the University of Alaska was given access to the lake for a week-long study. They documented multiple sightings, captured the lights on both still photography and video, and conducted spectroscopic analysis that revealed the lights were not plasma, not bioluminescence, and not reflected light from any conventional source. The spectrum showed emission lines that didn't match any known element or compound, and thermal imaging revealed that the lights were cold, emitting no heat signature despite their brightness. The scientists concluded that the Wonder Lake lights represented an unknown natural phenomenon that required further study, but their recommendation for continued research was denied, and the study was never published. Since then, the Park Service policy has been to acknowledge the lights if visitors report them, but to offer no official explanation, suggesting they might be unusual, aurora displays or reflections from aircraft. Explanations that anyone who's witnessed the lights firsthand knows are inadequate. Rangers assigned to Wonder Lake area are instructed not to encourage public interest in the phenomenon, and to discourage visitors from remaining at the lake after dark, specifically to watch for the lights, though no official restriction prevents night access. Some rangers privately admit that the lights are real, predictable, and deeply strange, appearing most frequently during calm, clear nights with no moon, and that they've learned to simply accept them as part of Wonder Lake's character, unexplained but seemingly harmless. But there are darker rumors as well. Stories of people who approached the lights too closely and experienced disorientation or time loss, waking hours later with no memory of the interval. Reports of electronic equipment failing when the lights appear, cameras refusing to function or batteries draining instantly, and whispered accounts of voices heard across the water on nights when the lights are active, voices speaking in languages no one recognizes, or in tones that sound almost like singing, sounds that carry across the lake with perfect clarity despite the distance. To this day, Wonder Lake remains open to visitors, and the lights continue to appear with regularity that suggests they're a stable feature of the location rather than rare anomalies. Whether they represent some unknown atmospheric or geological phenomenon, evidence of something stranger, or perhaps something that exists in the boundary between natural and impossible. The lights remain one of Denali's most persistent and well-documented mysteries, seen by hundreds but never explained, documented by scientists but never understood, and accepted by rangers as simply part of working in a place where the normal rules don't always apply, and where nature might include phenomena that our science hasn't yet learned to categorize. These 6 forbidden areas inside Denali represent just a fraction of the park's mysteries, but they share common characteristics that make them particularly compelling. They're all places where official explanations don't match the evidence, where restrictions seem disproportionate to stated reasons, and where those who've experienced the phenomena directly are left with more questions than answers. Whether you believe these restrictions hide mundane safety concerns or evidence of something genuinely anomalous, one thing is certain: Denali's 6 million acres contain secrets that the Park Service has decided are better left restricted, fenced, and forgotten than investigated and explained. Perhaps that's wise policy. Perhaps some places should remain forbidden, not because of what we might do to them, but because of what they might do to us. How they might challenge our certainties about what's possible in the natural world, and what might be hiding in the last great wilderness areas, where humans are still visitors subject to rules we don't fully understand. If this investigation into Denali's forbidden zones has left you questioning what else remains hidden in America's national parks, subscribe to explore more restricted areas where official explanations don't satisfy and mysteries persist despite decades of investigation. Let us know in the comments which Denali mystery intrigues you most, and what other national parks you think harbor secrets worth uncovering. Because sometimes the most carefully guarded mysteries aren't buried in ancient ruins or hidden in distant lands. They're right here in America's public lands, behind fences and warnings that most visitors never question, but that those who work there know conceal truths far stranger than any official explanation would ever admit.